You're waiting for that old motivation to come back, aren't you? Let me tell you a hard truth that might sting at first. It's not coming back. The old goals, the ambitions, the burning desires you used to rely on, they are dead. But before you click away in panic, listen to me. This is not a tragedy. It is a liberation. You are not depressed. You have simply stepped out of the illusion that life is a race. Welcome to the beginning of your real life. The promotion, the goals, the carefully mapped out future. They feel like someone else's dreams now, like clothes hanging in a closet that no longer fit your body. And the most unsettling part isn't the confusion. It's that you don't care. Not in a dramatic, nihilistic way, not in a nothing matters kind of teenage rebellion, but in a quiet, almost eerie way, as though an engine that's been running non-stop your entire life has simply gone silent. The ambitions that once burned so brightly feel like distant memories. The urgency that used to pull you out of bed has evaporated. And in the space where that urgency used to live, a single question echoes. What happened to my motivation? If you've been here, you know the next part very well. The mind doesn't stay quiet for long. It leans in and whispers, something's wrong. You broke yourself. Everyone else is out there achieving, building, becoming, and you're just here, existing, watching. The panic doesn't come from despair so much as from disorientation. You were promised that clarity would feel energizing, that seeing through the illusions of success and status would give you purpose, fire, direction. Instead, you got stillness, a strange, neutral stillness, and it feels suspicious. Perhaps you had what people like to call an awakening, a glimpse behind the curtain, a moment, subtle or dramatic, where the whole game of striving and becoming suddenly revealed itself as a game. You saw how much of your life had been organized around chasing an idea of yourself in the future. And for a moment, there was relief, even wonder. But then came the quiet, and then came the fear, because the old fire didn't return. And the mind doesn't know how to live without that fire. So let me tell you something that may unsettle you even more, but only because it goes directly against everything you've been taught. That fire isn't coming back, not in the way it used to, and that is not a tragedy. It only feels like one because the mind has mistaken the absence of tension for the absence of life. What has actually happened is much simpler and much stranger. You haven't lost motivation. You've lost the illusion that life needs to be pushed. And when that illusion collapses, the mind panics because pushing was all it knew. It treated tension as aliveness, pressure as purpose. Without those familiar sensations, it assumes something essential is missing. It declares an emergency. But there is no emergency. What you are experiencing right now is not a failure of character. It's not laziness. It's not depression in disguise. And it's certainly not a sign that you've wasted your potential. It is the sound of a false engine shutting down. The collapse of a system that was never designed to bring peace, only motion. The end of a chase that could never arrive anywhere. And yes, it's disorienting. It can feel like standing still while the rest of the world rushes by. But what if this stillness is not a pause in life, but the place where real life begins? Most of us were taught very early on that life is something you must drive, that if you are not pushing forward, you are falling behind, that motivation is the fuel of existence itself. But no one ever stopped to ask where that fuel came from. No one questioned what exactly was being burned. Because if you look closely, beneath all that ambition and discipline and self-improvement, there was always a quiet hum of dissatisfaction, a subtle feeling of not enough, not yet, not as I am. That sense of lack became the engine. It told you to get up, to improve, to prove, to become. And it worked in a way. It produced movement. It produced achievement. It produced a life that looked meaningful from the outside. But it came at a cost. Because an engine that runs on inadequacy can never rest. It must always point you toward the future, toward the next version of yourself that will finally be acceptable. Awakening, if we must use that word, is not some grand acquisition of wisdom. It is a loss. You lose the belief that you are an unfinished project. You lose the sense that there is a separate you who needs to be perfected before life can begin. And when that belief loosens, even slightly, the engine sputters. Because if there is no one to become, what is there to strive for? The mind doesn't like this question. It prefers problems it can solve, goals it can chase. So when the engine quiets, it fills the silence with labels. It calls this state apathy, burnout, lack of direction. It diagnoses, it compares, it urges you to fix yourself and get back on track. But notice something. Even in the midst of this so-called loss of motivation, life has not stopped. Your heart is beating. Your breath is moving in and out. Thoughts arise and dissolve. The day unfolds. Something is clearly functioning. What has stopped is the compulsive sense that you must become someone else to be allowed to live. And the mind, unfamiliar with this way of being, confuses the absence of compulsion with emptiness. It doesn't recognize ease. It doesn't trust stillness. It assumes that without pressure, everything will collapse. But pressure was never life. It was noise. Alanwatts once spoke of life not as a journey toward a destination, but as a dance. Music does not rush to finish. A song is not successful because it reaches its final note. Each note exists for its own sake, arising and dissolving in its own time. Your old motivation treated life like a race. Your awakening has revealed it as music. And the pause you are in now is not silence. It is the space between notes. Stay with that space for a moment, not to analyze it, not to fix it, just to notice it. Notice how threatening it feels to the mind and how neutral it feels to everything else. Notice how nothing is actually wrong. This is not the end of your life's energy. It is the end of a particular kind of strain. And in the quiet left behind, something far more subtle is waiting to be recognized. We'll begin to look at that next. Before this quiet arrived, before the engine went silent, there was a kind of fuel you were running on that most people never stop to examine. It felt like motivation, ambition, drive. But if you look closely now, with the clarity that only comes after it's gone, you may begin to notice something unsettling about it. It was never clean energy. It always burned with smoke. Ask yourself, gently, without judgment, why did you want the things you wanted? Why those goals and not others? Why the constant pressure to improve, to optimize, to become more? On the surface, the answers seem reasonable. Security, respect, freedom, happiness. But if you stay with the question a little longer, if you don't rush to defend yourself, something quieter begins to emerge underneath all those justifications. A subtle sense of insufficiency, a feeling that who you were right now was not quite acceptable. That feeling didn't shout, it whispered. It hummed in the background of your life like electricity in the walls. Not yet, it said, not enough. And so motivation became the strategy for escaping that feeling. If I achieve this, then I'll relax. If I become that, then I'll be whole. If I fix myself just a little more, life will finally begin. This is the hidden bargain behind most ambition. Fulfillment postponed, wholeness deferred, always just over the horizon. And the mind, clever as it is, learned how to weaponize this postponement. It built stories. When I get the promotion, I'll feel secure. When I find the right relationship, I'll be complete. When I reach that level of success or insight or confidence, I'll finally be allowed to rest. But you know how this story goes, because you lived it. Each milestone delivered a brief rush, a momentary sense of arrival, and then the ground shifted. The horizon moved. The next version of enough appeared, slightly farther away. It was never a failure of discipline. It was the nature of the game itself. You are trying to arrive at a place that does not exist. Alanwatts compared this to chasing the horizon, believing that if you could just understand it better, walk faster, plan more carefully, you would eventually reach the place where the sky touches the earth. But the horizon is not a destination. It's a relationship. It moves with you. And the self you were trying to complete worked the same way. The moment you thought you were close, it redefined itself. The ego loved this arrangement, not because it made you happy, but because it made you busy. The ego, that collection of thoughts claiming to be you, depends on problems to solve and futures to manage. It needs becoming the way a fire needs oxygen. If there is nothing to fix, nothing to improve, nothing to chase, it begins to feel threatened. So it keeps the sense of lack alive. It tells you rest is dangerous, stillness is stagnation, satisfaction is complacency. And for a long time, you believed it. You called this voice motivation. You praised it. You built an identity around being driven, disciplined, ambitious. You wore your exhaustion like proof that you were doing life correctly. And society applauded. Productivity was rewarded. Restlessness was normalized. Anxiety was reframed as passion. Then something cracked. Not violently, not necessarily in a dramatic moment. Perhaps it happened quietly, while listening to a talk, or sitting alone, or watching your own thoughts one evening and realizing they were not you. Perhaps you saw, even for a second, that the one who was supposed to arrive in the future was just a story, a mental image stitched together from memories, expectations, and borrowed standards. Awakening is not the addition of something new, it is the subtraction of something false. You didn't gain clarity so much as lose a misconception. The belief that there is a separate someone inside you who must manage life, direct it, turn it into something worthwhile. And when that belief loosens, entire motivational structure collapses with it. Because here is the part no one warned you about. When you stop believing you are incomplete, motivation as you knew it cannot survive. It was built entirely on the assumption that you were lacking, that life needed improvement before it could be lived. When that assumption dissolves, even slightly, the old fuel source disappears. The mind experiences this as a problem. It looks around for the familiar tension, the subtle anxiety that used to propel you forward, and it cannot find it. Instead, it finds presence, openness, a strange neutrality. And because the mind has been trained to equate tension with importance, it concludes that nothing matters anymore. But notice what is actually gone. Not intelligence, not capacity, not care. What is gone is the compulsive need to justify your existence through effort. The belief that your value is conditional. The story that says you must become someone before you are allowed to be. This is why the loss of motivation feels so frightening. Not because life has drained of meaning, but because the meaning you were given was tied to striving. When striving collapses, meaning has to be seen differently. And the mind resists this shift with everything it has. It would rather feel anxious than groundless. It would rather chase than rest in not knowing. So it calls this phase dangerous. It whispers that you are falling behind, that others are outpacing you, that you are wasting time. But look closely. Who is measuring? Against what standard? And for whose approval? The belief in a separate self was doing all of that, comparing, measuring, ranking. And now that belief has been exposed as an illusion, the entire scoreboard disappears. Of course, the game feels empty when you stop believing in the rules. But emptiness is not what this is. It is unfamiliar space. Space where the old narrative no longer makes sense, and the new one has not yet appeared. The mind calls this void, but the void is only frightening to something that needs constant structure. To life itself, it is just openness. In Zen, they sometimes speak of the great doubt, the moment when all conceptual footholds dissolve, not to punish you, but to free you from leaning on them. Because as long as you believe you are an object moving through life, you will try to optimize the movement. But when you see that you are life itself, expressing as this moment, optimization becomes irrelevant. You were never meant to be a project. You were never meant to arrive. Motivation, as you knew it, was the symptom of a misunderstanding. And now that misunderstanding is unraveling. The unraveling feels like loss because the mind cannot yet imagine action without anxiety. It cannot conceive of movement without fear. But that does not mean such movement does not exist. It simply means you have not learned to recognize it yet. That recognition begins in the next phase, the one the mind fears most and understands least. The space where nothing is pushing you forward and nothing is pulling you back. The space that feels like standing still, even though everything is quietly rearranging itself. That is where we'll go next. After the old fuel burns out, after the striving quiets and the horizon loses its grip on you, there is a stretch of road no one really prepares you for. You don't collapse. You don't fall apart. Life doesn't implode in some dramatic fashion. Instead, something far stranger happens. Almost nothing happens. Or at least, nothing happens in the way you were taught to recognize as progress. This is the phase that feels like floating between worlds. The old desires no longer pull you forward, but no new passions have arrived to replace them. You wake up, move through your day, and everything feels slightly distant, as if you're watching your own life from a few steps back, understanding it, functioning within it, but no longer driven by it. The mind calls this the void, and it says the word as if it's a diagnosis. In this space, goals lose their magnetism. Plans feel oddly hollow. You might look at a list of ambitions you once cherished and feel nothing at all. Not resistance, not sadness, just neutrality. It can feel disturbing, as though something essential has drained out of you. The voice in your head becomes concerned, then critical, then alarmed. It asks, "What's wrong with me? Why don't I want anything anymore?" But what if this isn't a loss of wanting, but the end of compulsive wanting? What if the appetite that disappeared was never hunger at all, but restlessness pretending to be purpose? Imagine a glass of muddy water that has been shaken for years. As long as it's being disturbed, The water looks opaque. You assume that's just how it is. Then one day the shaking stops. At first it seems like nothing is happening, but slowly, quietly, the sediment settles. Clarity appears, not because something was added, but because the disturbance ended. This is the void phase, not emptiness, but settling. The mind doesn't recognize this because it has been trained to equate movement with life and stillness with danger. It assumes that if you are not striving, you are stagnating. If you are not desiring, you are depressed. But watch closely. Are you actually suffering here, or are you simply uncomfortable with the absence of familiar tension? There is a difference. Much of what we call motivation was really anxiety in disguise. A low-grade panic about falling behind, being left out, not becoming enough in time. When that anxiety dissolves, there is relief, yes, but also disorientation. You don't know how to orient yourself without fear acting as your compass. You don't know who you are when nothing is chasing you. So the ego begins its protest. It whispers that you've become passive, that you're wasting your life, that everyone else is out there building something while you're standing still. It points to the world's noise as evidence that you're doing something wrong. But notice something important. The world has always been noisy. You're just not vibrating at the same frequency anymore. In this stillness, you might feel strangely transparent, less solid, less defined. Your old identity no longer fits quite right. The labels you used to wear, ambitious, driven, productive, start slipping off. And without them, the mind scrambles to find something to hold on to. It wants a new project, a new self-improvement plan. Even spiritual growth can become a substitute ambition if you're not careful. But the void does not respond to effort. You cannot hustle your way out of it. You cannot optimize it or reframe it into productivity. It is not a problem to be solved. It is an absence that must be allowed. Think of it like exhaling fully for the first time in your life. You didn't realize you'd been holding your breath because the tension was familiar. It was how you learned to live. When the breath finally releases, the relief is profound. But immediately after comes a strange vulnerability. You don't know how to exist without that constant clenching. Part of you wants to tense back up just to feel normal again. This is why people often try to recreate their old stress. They overwork, they overthink, they manufacture urgency, they pick fights with themselves. Anything to avoid the quiet. Because the quiet feels like disappearance to an identity built on effort. But you are not disappearing. Something far more subtle is happening. The system is recalibrating. For your entire life, action arose from a sense of deficiency. There was a gap between where you were and where you thought you should be, and that gap generated movement. Now that the gap is closing, movement feels uncertain. The mind says, if I'm already okay, why do anything at all? But this question assumes that action only arises from lack. It has never considered another possibility. The void is where that other possibility begins to reveal itself, though not in a way the mind can immediately recognize. It doesn't announce itself as inspiration or passion. It arrives as a kind of alert rest, a presence without agenda, like a cat lying in the sun, doing nothing and yet completely alive. There is no striving here, but there is awareness. There is no urgency, but there is clarity. The mind calls this emptiness because it can't find its usual hooks. But the body knows better. The breath continues. The senses remain vivid. You notice small things more. Light through a window, the weight of your body in a chair, sounds you used to filter out. Life hasn't gone anywhere. It's simply no longer being filtered through the lens of, what does this get me? Alan Watts spoke of insecurity not as a problem to be solved, but as a fundamental feature of existence. Trying to eliminate it creates neurosis. Learning to rest with it creates wisdom. The void phase is this lesson lived, not conceptually, but viscerally. There is no guarantee here, no roadmap, no promise of who you will become. And yet, strangely, nothing is actually missing. This is where most people turn back. They decide something has gone wrong and rebuild the old engine. They return to striving, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Because the known pain feels safer than the unknown openness. But if you can stay here just a little longer, without demanding answers, without rushing to define yourself again, something begins to shift. You start to notice that life is still moving. You still respond to emails. You still have conversations. You still eat, sleep, walk, think. Action is happening, but it no longer feels personal. It's not about you becoming something. It's just what's next. Simple, ordinary, unremarkable, and yet strangely peaceful. The void is not a dead zone. It is a threshold, a decompression chamber between two ways of living, one driven by tension, the other by something much quieter and far more intelligent. But you cannot rush through it. You cannot skip it. You have to let the old noise drain out before you can hear what has always been underneath. And what emerges from that quiet is not the old motivation reborn in a spiritual costume. It is something else entirely. Something the mind has no name for yet. Movement without strain. Action without anxiety. A way of living that does not need to justify itself. That is what waits on the other side of this stillness. And that is where we'll go next. When the mind finally grows tired of arguing with the silence, something unexpected begins to happen. Not all at once, not with fireworks or revelations, just quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a tide turning without announcing itself. Life starts to move again, but this time there is no familiar sense of effort attached to it. Things begin to happen through you rather than because of you. You might notice yourself responding to an email without resistance, getting up and doing a task without negotiating with yourself, speaking when something needs to be said and remaining silent when it doesn't. There is action, but no inner monologue pushing it forward. No voice saying, "This is good for your future," or "This proves your worth," or "This means you're on track." The action simply arises, the way a breath arises, the way a thought arises, the way a step follows another step when you're walking. The mind finds this deeply confusing at first. It keeps waiting for motivation to return, for that surge of desire or fear that used to precede every movement. But nothing like that appears. And yet, things are getting done. You are not paralyzed. You are not frozen. You are simply no longer dragging a story behind every action. This is where an old misunderstanding begins to unravel. You were taught that without pressure, nothing would happen. That without ambition, you would become passive. That without goals, life would lose its shape. But what you are discovering now is that pressure was never the source of intelligence. It was just noise layered on top of it. Think about the moments in your life when you were most alive, truly alive, not impressing anyone, not chasing an outcome, just absorbed. Perhaps it was creating something, solving a problem you genuinely cared about, being deeply present with another person, or losing yourself in play. In those moments, were you motivated in the usual sense? Or were you simply engaged? You weren't trying to be anything. You weren't managing your image. You weren't thinking 5 steps ahead. You were responding. Life presented something, and a response emerged. Clean, direct, unburdened. This is the kind of action that begins to return after the void. Not the anxious striving of the ego, but a natural responsiveness. Alanwatts sometimes called this doing without a doer, the illusion that there must be a separate entity inside you pulling the strings. When that illusion loosens, action doesn't stop. It becomes lighter. It's like music. A melody does not struggle to reach its final note. Each note appears at the precise moment it should, then disappears, making room for the next. The music isn't trying to be music. It is simply unfolding. In the same way, your life does not need to be pushed forward. It unfolds when it is not being obstructed. This is what ancient traditions pointed to with phrases like effortless effort or action through non-action. Not laziness, not withdrawal, but action that is so aligned with the moment that it doesn't feel like effort at all. You are no longer rowing against the current of your own resistance. You are moving with what is. The difference is subtle but profound. When action comes from fear or lack, it is always slightly distorted. There is tension in it, a need to control outcomes, a constant checking to see if you're doing it right. When action comes from presence, it is simple, appropriate. You do what needs to be done, and when it's done, it's done. No residue. You might work harder than you ever did before, but without burnout. Or you might rest deeply without guilt. You might take bold steps or make no move at all. The point is not what you do, but where it comes from. The old system demanded constant justification. The new one does not. Someone asks you a question. You answer, not to appear intelligent or helpful, but because an answer arises. A situation requires firmness. Firmness appears. Another requires gentleness. Gentleness appears. There is no internal committee debating which version of you should show up. There is just response. This is why this way of living often looks strange to others. From the outside, it may appear inconsistent, unplanned, even irresponsible. But from the inside, it feels precise, like water finding its way around rocks. No hesitation, no strain. Imagine watching a skilled craftsperson at work, a master carpenter perhaps. They are not rushing, and yet nothing is wasted. Each movement is economical, not because they are trying to be efficient, but because they are present. They are not thinking about becoming a better carpenter while they work. They are simply working. And in that simplicity, excellence appears. This is what becomes available when the psychological burden of becoming drops away. You are no longer performing life. You are participating in it. The mind, of course, has objections. It worries that without a narrative, you'll lose direction. That without ambition, you'll drift. That without control, things will fall apart. But look at your own experience. Since the old motivation dissolved, has life actually stopped? Or has it continued, just without the drama? What's falling apart is not your life. It's the belief that life needs micromanagement. That belief created constant interference. When it relaxes, intelligence has room to operate. This doesn't mean you stop planning altogether. Planning still happens, but lightly. It's no longer an attempt to secure your identity in the future. It's just a practical response to circumstances, a map, not a destiny. And when circumstances change, the plan changes too, without crisis. You are no longer invested in proving that you are moving forward. You are simply moving where movement is called for. And sometimes movement is stillness. This is the paradox that the ego cannot accept. When you stop trying to be motivated, real energy returns. Not the jittery energy of anxiety, but something steady, sustainable. The energy of life itself moving through an unobstructed channel. You are not doing less because you care less. You are doing less unnecessary work, less self-generated pressure, less imaginary labor for a future self that doesn't exist. And in the space created by that simplicity, something deeply human reappears. Play, curiosity, interest, not as strategies but as natural expressions. You find yourself drawn to things again, but not because they promise fulfillment, simply because they are interesting, alive, present. This is action without strain, movement without the mover, life happening without the constant commentary about how it should be happening. And there is one more shift left to see, the one that makes all of this feel not just workable, but trustworthy. The moment you realize that you were never meant to live life. Life has always been living you. That is where we will end. At some point, often without ceremony, a quiet recognition settles in. Not as a conclusion you reach, but as something you notice has already been true for a while. Life has been moving all along. Not because you managed it correctly, not because you stayed motivated, not because you kept the right narrative running in your head, but simply because it knows how to. This is the moment when the final fear loosens its grip. The fear that without constant effort, everything would unravel. That without ambition, you would disappear. That without control, you would drift into irrelevance. And yet here you are, breathing, responding, engaging, living. The catastrophe never arrived. What dissolves here is the deepest misunderstanding of all. The idea that life is something you must do, that you stand outside of it, directing it like a project, shaping it into something acceptable. But look closely. Where would you even stand to do that? You are not separate from the process. You are not the wave trying to control the ocean. You are the wave, appearing as this moment, with no obligation to become a better wave. When this is seen, even faintly, the struggle relaxes. You still act, you still choose, you still participate in the world, but the strain of self-authorship fades. You are no longer trying to write the perfect story about yourself. You are letting the story tell itself. Alanwatts used to say that the universe is not a thing, but an event, a happening, and so are you. Not a static identity trying to achieve permanence, but a movement, a verb, a dance. The moment you stop trying to pin yourself down, you begin to move more freely. This is why the loss of motivation was never a mistake. Motivation, as you knew it, was tied to the belief that you were lacking, that life had to be justified, that you needed to earn your place in existence. When that belief falls away, the machinery built to support it becomes unnecessary, heavy, obsolete. Of course it shuts down. What remains is not apathy, but intimacy. You meet life directly, without the filter of, what does this say about me? You care, but without agenda. You engage, but without grasping. You create, not to prove your creativity, but because creation happens when there is space for it. There is a peculiar lightness in this way of living, not because nothing matters, but because everything no longer has to matter in the same way. You are no longer carrying a backpack filled with concepts like success, purpose, worthiness, significance. Words that sound noble, but become heavy when you haul them around for years. When you finally set them down, you realize how much effort went into simply holding them up. Does this mean you stop contributing to the world? On the contrary, when you are no longer preoccupied with becoming someone, you become far more available to what is actually needed. Compassion arises naturally when you are not defending an identity. Intelligence expresses itself when it is not trying to impress. Responsibility shows up when it is not fueled by guilt or fear. You might notice that caring now feels quieter, less dramatic, more grounded. You don't need to announce it, justify it, or turn it into a mission. It simply shows up as attention, as presence, as doing what is appropriate in the moment. This is why a child does not need motivation to play. Play is not a means to an end. It is life enjoying itself. And when the child is tired, they stop. No guilt, no self-judgment, no narrative about productivity, just a natural rhythm of engagement and rest. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to abandon that rhythm in favor of constant effort. Awakening is not a return to childishness. It is a return to simplicity. You eat when you are hungry, rest when you are tired, speak when there is something to say, create when creation arises. And when nothing arises, you remain still without turning that stillness into a problem. Life does not need to be optimized to be lived. Of course, the mind will visit from time to time. Old habits don't vanish overnight. It will suggest that you should be doing more, becoming more, planning further ahead. When it does, you don't need to fight it or correct it. You can let it speak and pass, the way weather moves across the sky. You don't argue with clouds. You don't cling to them either. Gradually, trust grows. Not trust in yourself as a personality, but trust in the process that has always been functioning beneath your efforts. You begin to see that even when you were striving, it was life moving. Even when you were anxious, it was life expressing itself through tension. Nothing was ever outside of it. So when you ask now, what should I do with my life? The question softens. It loses its urgency. You begin to hear a different inquiry underneath it. What wants to happen here? And sometimes the answer is clear action. Sometimes it is rest. Sometimes it is not knowing. All of it belongs. This is the quiet invitation hidden inside your loss of motivation. Not to give up on life, but to stop trying to live it correctly. To let life live itself through this particular form, with its own timing, its own intelligence, its own rhythm. You didn't lose your drive. You lost a false story about what drives life in the first place. And yes, there is space where that story used to be. A silence, a gap. But listen carefully. That space is not empty. It is alive, full, intimate. The river does not need to know where it is going to reach the ocean. It flows, and somehow, inevitably, it arrives. You are not separate from that movement. You never were. So if you find yourself resting more than before, let it be rest. If you find yourself acting, let it be action. If nothing seems to be happening, trust that something is settling. There is nothing you need to become before you are allowed to be here. And perhaps that is the most radical realization of all, that you are already home, not because you achieved it, but because you stopped running past it. That the stillness you once feared is not the absence of life, but life without the noise. If this resonates, sit with it. Let it echo. You don't need to do anything with it. Just notice how it feels to hear that nothing is wrong, that nothing is missing, that this, right now, is enough. Life is not asking you to be motivated. It is simply inviting you to be present. This video doesn't truly end here. It continues in your life. And if you feel alone in this silence, just take a look at the comments section. You will see thousands of others who have also come to this same pause, just like you. I have one small question for you. What is the one burden you are finally ready to put down today? Write it below as a declaration of your own liberation. Thank you for being here, and remember, you don't need to run anymore. You are already home.